We've cut out all our fabrics and everything. So now what we need is our stitching pattern. We need to stitch our fabrics onto the paper or stitch our pieces together. So in front of me, I have my copy that I made after I did it in reverse. So I call this my master pattern, and I'll be using that. I'll show you how I use that. This was my original one. So now if I turn this over, everything's going to line up when I take it to a light box. And I don't know whether you can see that, but it should work. So this one I just set off to the side. I'll do other copies and everything as well and show you other things as I go along. So this is my master pattern. What I do for my stitching is I will take this to my copier, and it's my printer, but I will make a copy on freezer paper. You'll have to do a test to see which way you're going to put your freezer paper into the printer. Mine goes in with the dull side up. So I'll make a copy of this onto freezer paper, just like I did for cutting out my pieces for my pattern to cut the fabric. So now I've made one copy on freezer paper. If you're going to use copy paper, you'll have to print out one, and this is just plain printer paper. For every block that you print on regular printer paper, you're going to need one stitching pattern. If you're going to make 4 blocks, you're going to need 4 copies of this. And you make sure you print it at 100%. You'll have to photocopy it, or if you have a scanner and on your printer, you could probably scan it in and print it out. You just have to make sure it's going to be the exact size. So here is my paper copy, which I will show you that later. I'm going to show you the freezer paper method. Here is my one copy. I have been able to use the freezer paper up to 6 times, and I think even more than that. I do log cabin blocks, and I do it the same way as I do this. And I have been able to use those pieces, I'm sure, like 8 times. But as you iron it on the fabrics and take it off, you may have to hold your iron on a little longer to make the pieces stick, and you'll see that as I go along. So for the freezer paper, all I need is one copy of this. And remember, it's printed on, you can see the shiny side there. It's printed on the dull side. And make sure it's coming out exactly the same as your original pattern. If it's not exactly the same, it won't go together. Okay, those are my other copies, so I'll set those off to the side. So now we're going to go on to how do I stitch this thing together. I'm going to take my freezer paper copy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut along the dotted line, and I call this my stitching pattern. And I'm just going to cut out along the edge. You can leave a little bit on the outside edge if you like, but I've found that I'm just going to cut it off anyway. So, and when you're reusing your freezer paper, you won't have that extra on there. Okay. All these little extra pieces of freezer paper, I don't throw them away. I have a little container that I put all the little cut-off pieces in because I use them for so many things. I've just found freezer paper is a godsend to me. Okay. Now, just like we did when we cut out our little pieces to cut out our fabric, we're going to do the same thing with this copy, but we're not going to be cutting on the lines. We're going to be folding. I always pre-fold. I'm going to start with the highest number, and in this case it's 41. So I'm going to lay this out. I'm going to put my piece, this is just a scrap piece of template plastic that I had from my card making days, and I have put a little hole in it so I hang it on a little hook. And now, and you can use anything as long as it's got a nice straight edge. So this one has a nice straight edge there. You need something thin enough if you have a really thin piece of cardboard, but I found just a scrap piece of template plastic, because what you're going to be doing now is number 41 is my highest number. I'm going to lay my template plastic right on that line, and I'm going to take and fold it over, and I'm just going to fold it along that line, and I want to make sure I'm folding it exactly on the line. So if I find any little places that aren't, so it's folded on there nicely, you can. If you have a seam roller, I remembered the name of it, you can fold it and run it along there. Next is 40. Put my template plastic along the line, give it a fold, and I'm making sure that it's getting folded exactly on that line. You'll find it very helpful when you go to start sewing. So now 40, I want 39. So there's 39, and I'm double checking to make sure I've got it folded right on that line. And now 38. So in the method I'm going to show you, I won't be stitching through the paper. And 38, okay, it's 37. Lining it up on the 37. And now 36. Okay, so I'm going cross here. I'll put this into fast forward. I have all my lines folded now, and as you can see all the little fold lines. And that's exactly what I want. I have some things in front of me that I use when I'm paper piecing, and the first thing, of course, is our pattern that I finished off, and it's all folded. I have all my pieces cut to make one block, and they're in my little container. I have another little container that I use to put my pattern pieces in. I have my template plastic. I have my fabric rotary cutter. I do have a seam roller. I don't use it sometimes. I also have my little pokey tool, I call it. It's a stylus, okay? I also have two rulers here. One, I use an add a quarter ruler. The one I have is 12 inches long, and I'm hopefully going to get a smaller one, and there is what's called an add a quarter plus, which has a beveled edge instead of a flat edge like this, so that you don't need to use a piece of template plastic. On my ruler, I have placed a strip of glow line tape, and that is just so I can see. The glow line tape is 1/4 inch, and I've placed it along that little lip of the add a quarter. If you're not familiar with an add a quarter ruler, just check it out online. It's great for paper piecing. It comes in a smaller size as well, and I am eventually, when I get around to it, I will purchase a smaller one, because this one sometimes is just a little too long for what I need. If you don't have an add a quarter ruler, you can use a regular ruler and find out where the 1/4 inch mark is. It's right there. This one, like I showed you previously, I have the pink tape on there, and that's at my 3/8. So if you want to make sure you're always measuring at 1/4 inch, oh, here it is. Glow line tape comes in the 3 colors, so if you want to know where your 1/4 inch is, you could always take glow line tape, and if I can get this out here, and just take a piece of glow line tape and place it down. Now, I'm using a different color so I know where exactly a 1/4 inch is, that I don't get it confused with my 3/8. And I'm going to line that up along the 1/4 inch. Just rub it down, and I think I can use my rotary cutter just to trim off that bit there. It's going to stick to everything, including my finger. Sorry if I got out of frame again, and I'm just going to trim that off. So for those of you who don't have an add a quarter, you can use a regular ruler and just make sure you know where the 1/4 inch mark is. So glow line tape I use quite regularly on my rulers. What didn't I show you now? Okay, the other thing I use is I use the Acorn Precision Piecing, and it's Easy Press pen. I've referred to it in another video. This one has a felt or a felt thing, and to activate it you press down on it and it'll release the liquid. I find that when I'm doing paper piecing with just a regular seam where I'm not going through multiple seams, I just fill my water brush, and this is just a water brush purchased at the craft store, and I fill it. It's got a brush on it, and you can see it will just give me a small amount of liquid, and you don't need much of this. So I just fill it with the precision piecing. It's the easy fabric treatment, and these are refillable, so I just refill this. And so that's what I do for my pressing. Off to the side here, I do have my little Dritz iron, and it's been well used, as you can see, and it's hot right now, and I will clean it, but anyway, so that's that. My fabric rotary cutter and another little basket here. I think I told you about that. So for this piecing, what I have in front of me, I use a FAF. I have a FAF Creative 4.5, and there are 2 feet that when you're paper piecing, you want to be able to see the line or the cut edge when you're piecing. I use this foot, which hopefully I can get you to see that there is a little metal guide here. This is what's called a stitch in the ditch foot. I use this because when I'm paper piecing, if I'm using paper, which I do but not very much, I want to be able to stitch right on that line, so that little guide will run right along that stitching line. When I'm paper piecing, I will be folding back and I'll be stitching along the edge when I'm using the freezer paper. So that little guide will run right along the edge of the paper, and I will get an accurate stitching line. When you're paper piecing, you're not concerned about seam allowance or stitching with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You are using the paper as you're stitching. So either way, the stitch in the ditch foot is what I use. Hopefully you can see that. If you don't have a foot like this, I recommend that you use a see-through foot. This one you can see through it. You will be able to line up your foot and see where you are stitching. So that gives you the visibility because you want to stitch right along that line. When I was taught, and what I teach, is when you're stitching, don't look at your needle, because if you look at your needle, it seems, as long as you look ahead of the needle. So on this one here, again, if you try to look right at the needle, you can, it seems like I go crooked if I do that. You may not have that problem, but I always look just a little bit ahead of the needle. I'm not really looking at the needle. So that might help. So those are the feet. I think I have everything in front of me here. Make sure my iron is turned on, and again, this is the Dritz iron, and I set it on 4. I'm going to drop my heat down to 3. Whoops, I turned it off. And I'm only going to put it on 3. The reason I'm only putting it on 3 is because I'm not using 100% cotton fabric. I am using a poly cotton fabric. You have to adjust your iron to the temperature that your fabric requires. If you use a very hot iron on a poly cotton, it will mess up your fabric. So set the temperature of your iron according to what fabric you're using. I think I have everything that we need. So freezer paper is my friend. I know Melissa said she had problems with that first piece. Well, I really don't, because what I'm going to do is I am going to just take my little pokey tool. I'm just going to put a little hole right at the corner of each one of those points. It's not going to hurt my paper at all. It won't affect anything. Now, you probably noticed I don't have any pins. I don't use pins. Don't need them. The only time I use pins is when I'm sewing, if it's in different units and I have to sew those pieces together, then I'll use pins. But for this, I don't use pins at all. Don't really need it. I have my center piece. Remember, our fabric, we cut it with the wrong side of the fabric up. So what I'm going to do is your first piece is always going to go down with the wrong side of the fabric to the shiny side of the freezer paper. I now know where I need to place that piece. Now I'm going to take this little piece off. I know I cut it with the wrong side up. I'm going to take it off, put it in my little container there, and now I'm going to place the wrong side of the fabric. Your first piece will always be wrong side of the fabric down against your paper. I'm going to take it over to my iron. Now remember, you don't want to press. Try to move some of this stuff out of the way here. And you can probably see. I guess I better put my foot back on my sewing machine. Okay. So I'm going to move this. I think if I turn it this way. Hopefully you can see that now. I also have a little silicone mat that I just bought at, I think at the Dollar Tree or something like that, dollar store. And it's a silicone mat that your iron isn't going to melt anything. I keep that off to the side here just in case my iron tips over or something. It's not going to burn on my mat. So I've placed my piece down on there. Now I want to press that in place so the freezer paper can hold that. And the freezer paper is, remember, it's plastic coated. So you're going to try and avoid pressing your iron on the shiny side. So now how am I going to press that? Well, I have a piece. It was a big piece, but I cut through it with my rotary cutter. So I just saved a small piece of it, and this is just a Teflon sheet, and it's can be used for baking. You can find it in craft stores. It's specifically called a craft sheet or Teflon pressing sheet. You can find them anywhere. So now what I'm going to do, so I don't press on my freezer paper, I'm going to lay this down, and then I'm just going to take my iron, and if this moves out of place, I don't have to worry. I know exactly where it's going to go. And I'll press just down. Your fabric will stick to the freezer paper, and if it's a new piece of freezer paper, it should stick fairly well. However, I am now going to turn this over. Now you probably see this does stick to the plastic coating, but it comes off very easily. No fuss, no muss. I'm going to place it down so I don't get any of the plastic on my wool cutting mat. I'm just going to place it down like that so it's covered. I can now press that into place, and I'll press it from the paper side. Because I've lowered the heat of my iron, I may need to hold it on a bit longer. You can see it's stuck on there. Comes off beautifully. My first piece now is in place. I don't have to worry about holding it down, trying to glue stick it or whatever. I'll set this off to the side because I might need it again. So now, for piecing this together, I don't have to think at all other than what comes after number 1, which is my centerpiece. Number 2, I look in my bin. Because I put these in number order, I have number 2 right on top. I find number 2. I'm going to fold it back along that line. My fabric is stuck here, and I'm just going to use my pokey tool and just slide it underneath there. My piece is still stuck on. I have it folded between the center and the number 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm either going to take a ruler with my 1/4 inch line. I think I should have used orange tape. I can't see that great. But now you will cut off so that you have a 1/4 inch from that folded line. Whether you're using freezer paper or regular paper, I still do this. Some people don't, but I do. For my add a 1/4, I'm just going to butt that lip up, and that will give me a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember, we're not using the 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to be stitching along the edge of the paper. So I've trimmed that off, and I need another bin. This is my, I've got static. So now I'll just stick that little cutoff in there. I now have it in place, ready to put my pink section on. I'm going to flip this over. Now I want right sides together. Plain fabric doesn't have really a right or wrong side, but when I cut it out, I ironed this on to the wrong side. So now we know this is right side up. This is my right side, so I'm going to place right sides together. And I'm just going to line up the cut edges. You can see on the other side, I have a little bit on each side. Try to get that so you can see it. So now that is ready to be stitched. I can now take that to the sewing machine and stitch. What I do, this is laid down. This is the way I'm going to be putting it into my sewing machine. And I am going to start right about here, and I'm going to line my little guide up, and I'm just going to stitch right along the edge of that paper. I'm not going to back stitch. I don't need to. If you're using the stitch through method where you're using copy paper or just regular printer paper, what you'll have to do is turn this over, and you're going to be stitching on the line between the center and the white. Now, you're probably going to have to stitch and back stitch and then back stitch at the end. I don't do that. With the freezer paper, I found a much easier way to do it. You don't have to back stitch because I am going to be starting way over here, and all I'm doing with freezer paper is I am stitching straight lines. So I start here, stitch right off the end. Now I'm going to move the camera, and I'll be taking this to the sewing machine, and I'll be showing you how I stitch it down. Okay, I'm set up at my sewing machine. I have my pieces lined up here, and I don't have to look to see if it's big enough because I know it's big enough. And so I have my foot on with the, that's kind of hard to see, I know, but I have my little stitch in the ditch foot on. And I am using, and I better make sure my machine is set up properly, I'm going to use a 1.5 stitch length, and I'm just going to start with my needle in the fabric. I don't want to try to start off the edge of the fabric because I could bunch it up. And because there's excess fabric, I don't have to worry about anything, and you'll see that in a minute. I'm going to just put my presser foot down, and my guide is right along the edge of that paper. And I'm going to set my needle down. I don't know what happened there, but, and well, we'll see. Sounded a little funny, but okay. And if I don't have 1/4 inch on this bottom piece, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to start stitching and run my guide right along the edge. And sorry if that camera is shaking. And I've stitched right off the end. I'll trim my threads, my starting threads. And as you see, I didn't have to back stitch. Now, whenever I'm pulling my threads out, because I found with the lightweight thread, and I believe I'm using an 80 Deco Bob, and I'm just using white thread. If I was making this into something, I would probably use a neutral gray color. So that's stitched down now. And when I do pull my threads, and before I cut them off, I didn't show you, but I pull my threads towards me, and then I back off, and then I clip. The reason for that is that I found if I pull it and then clip, they bounce back, and the lightweight thread does kind of have some static to it. So there's my stitching line, and I've stitched along the edge of the paper, and you can see where I've left my little label on. and I'm going to take that off now. So I have to move the camera again. So I'm going to move the camera and get set up and show you what I do next. Okay, my camera didn't want to play nice because I moved it. Okay, so here, when we last left off, I had showed you how to stitch that down. And so now what I'm going to do is, because I've stitched along there, I'm just going to fold this paper back and turn it over to the wrong side. I'm going to remove my little label, and of course static electricity. That's where our removable tape comes in handy. There we go. And I'll be needing that again probably. So I've just used a piece of removable tape, or yes, removable tape. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to take my water brush with the precision piecing liquid in it, and I'm just going to run that brush along the seam. You can't see it, but it is damp, and that's all you want. You don't want it wet. So I've just run it across there. Now I'm just going to take my fingers and just give that a finger press. If you want, you can use your seam roller. That is secure. I didn't have to use any pins. I didn't have to try to follow and back stitch at a certain point. There's no back stitching there. It's just like you were sewing a regular seam. Now I'm going to take it to the iron and I'm going to press it. What pressing is going to do is the freezer paper is going to make it stick down. So I have my little Teflon pressing sheet. I always make a mess when I sew. So my Teflon pressing sheet, I'm going to put it where I can just get the tip of my iron and make sure that I don't get my iron on the freezer paper. I'm just going to give it a press. And that's now into position. This is stuck a little bit. That's on there. It's come up a bit. So I'm going to place it face down. I have that seam pressed there so it's nice and smooth. I'm just going to turn it over. The pink section I added was right here. So with the Teflon pressing sheet underneath, I can now press that pink section down. And it sticks better when you press it from the paper side. There it's in position. It's not going anywhere. I can turn it, I can play with it, I can leave it. When I come back, it's like, where did I leave off? I don't have to worry about that. I know exactly where I left off because my next piece tells me that I left off. This is the piece I'm going to be putting on next. So number 3, which is the pink, fold it over. I'm going to find where number 3 is, and I'm going to fold it along the line between the center and the number 3. And it's stuck down a bit, the white. So I'm going to line up my template plastic, fold that back, and I can now run my pokey tool that I call it along there, and now I have my piece left out here. I'm going to take my add a quarter, butt it up against there, and just trim off that excess. That's all the waste I have so far. So now my next piece is number 3. So there it is right there. I can move my template plastic out of the way. And now I'm going to flip this over. My number 3 is going to go on there. I want right sides together. I know that this is the wrong side. I'll place it down on there. Line up my cut edges. If you want, you can take that off or leave it on. I'm going to take it off now. Okay, where's my tape? There we go. For some reason, I've got a lot of static today. So there is my piece in place. I just pick it up, turn it over, and get it lined up, and I'll line it up when I get to the sewing machine. But you can see now it's exactly the same as I did in the first part where I showed you with the sewing machine. My edges are lined up. I've got extra on both sides. Take it to the sewing machine. Start stitching here and stitch right off the end, no back stitching, and I shouldn't need any pins. I'll take it to the sewing machine, and off camera I will stitch down the edge of the freezer paper. Okay, I've stitched down there. Turn it over. That's what it should look like. Okay, I'm going to use my magic liquid, as I think Stephanie calls it. Just run that along there. If I need my brush a little wetter, I can just squeeze it where it says squeeze. I usually squeeze it inside the cap so that if I over squeeze, the liquid will stay in the cap, not all over my piecing. And you just, like I said before, you just want it damp. So now with my fingers, I'm just going to carefully press that into place with my fingers. I don't always use my seam roller, but you can if you want. One other thing that I will show you late in, well, I'll show it to you now, but is I also have a clapper. And the clapper I don't really use when I'm piecing, but if I have to stitch pieces together, if there's units that I have to stitch together, then I will use my clapper. So now again, I'm going to lay my, boy do I make a mess. Lay my pressing sheet down, and I think for some reason I seem to be getting out of frame here, sorry. Okay, now I'm just going to press just the seam, because I don't want any of that plastic on my iron, and that's why I use this little iron. So now I'll take that off, make sure it's laying down good. I don't have any fabrics flopping around. I'm going to place this down. The piece I did was number 3. If I forget, number 4 is right there, so I know I did number 3. So I'm just going to give that a press just to hold the fabric down. Just peel that off. I have number 3 in place. And turn it so that the printed side is facing me. I want to look for number 4, which is over here, which is the light pink. Can't see it, but it is light pink. And again, I'm going to take my template plastic just to make sure that I get it. And I'm working on number 4, so I want to be over here. I'm going to lay this down, fold everything back. If it sticks, I'll just flip it up with my, this is sticking really good here. Okay, so I'm going to double check now to make sure I've got it on the right line, and I'm working on number 4. Put that back into position. Just about lost that. Anyway, now I'm going to use my add a quarter. Trim off the excess. Put my waste in there. And now fold it back. And number 4 is going to go on right there. Pick up my number 4 piece and put it on, and you can see it extends past the edges, so I know my piece is big enough. Some people will fold it back and check to make sure that it's covering the area they want, but I know because the way I cut it that it's going to be the right size. And the only way I can mess up is if I cut it out that I didn't cut enough on these sides. So now I'm going to take that, fold it back along the line, and that's what it looks like. I'm going to take my little label off here. I have a system for putting these on too that I don't have to worry about the static, but I'll show you that after I get this done. So that's into position. I lift it up, and now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine again and just stitch along that edge of the paper. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've stitched that down. Flip this back, turn it over, use my water brush. You can probably see the liquid there. It's a little wetter than over here, but as long as it's damp, now just fold that into the finished position. Again, if you want to use your seam roller, you can. And now I'm still going to need this. Once I get along, I won't need this Teflon pressing sheet anymore. I'm just going to use my little iron and just press along the seam line there. Okay, and now just peel that back. Make sure that's laying flat. And I was on number 4 because I know 5 is there. I know exactly where I need to press. So I'm going to press there. Peel that off. And now my next number is 5. Turn it over. There's number 5. I'm using my template plastic here. I don't always use it, but because my freezer paper is sticking, or my fabric is sticking very well to the freezer paper, it just makes it a little more firm in there, so I don't go ripping anything. Trim. And now I need number 5 pink. So I'll fold it over. I need to put my number 5 right there. Got excess. There we go. So I'm going to line up the cut edges there. Flip it over. And again, take it to the sewing machine. Start on the fabric a little bit and stitch all the way down. So I'm off to do that. And I'll be back. There, it's stitched along that line. Stitched right there. If you stitch on the paper a little bit, don't worry about it. I'm going to fold it back. Fold it to this position. And I've added plenty of liquid there. You can see it's shiny there, or different color. That's plenty of liquid. Fold it back with my fingers. Finger press, and I'm not gonna use my seam roller. I usually don't. Not when I'm doing this type of paper piecing with the freezer paper. Just press along the seam line so it's laying nice and flat. Flip it over. What piece was I sewing? I was sewing, okay, gray is there, so that's 6. I was sewing 5, so that's where I need to press. And that should be good. And that's what it should look like. What's my next piece? My next piece is number 6. So I'll turn it over, and I know it's gray, so there's number 6. I'm going to use my template plastic. Fold it back. Release my fabric, make sure I'm lining it up properly and folding along the right line. Use my add a quarter. Trim off the excess. Flip it over. Take my number 6. Remember, I cut 2 pieces, so when I've got more than one piece, or if I'm working on more than one block, I will leave the little label on, and I will take the bottom piece, and where was I? There's number 6. So that's where it goes. I'll just take and place it along there. I'll leave this one and put it to the side or in a stack, because if I'm working with more than one block, I'll have multiples of that. So now I've got this into position. Just going to take it, flip it over, line it up, take it to the sewing machine, and stitch all the way down. Okay, I've stitched that one down. If I forget where I was, I know I was on number 6 because number 7 is right there. I'm going to fold this back, turn it over, and you can see where it doesn't take much of this liquid, and it's just damp. I'm going to fold this over, give it a finger press. I still don't have enough fabric on there yet, so I'm still going to use my pressing sheet. Now this isn't going to stick down yet because I haven't pressed on the paper side yet. Peel that off. Turn this over. Make sure my pressing sheet is underneath. I was working on 6, so I just need to press along number 6 here. And there it is. What's my next number? Number 7. So 6 is there, number 7 is over there. I'll take it and turn it. Fold it back. I have to use my template plastic again. Let's peel that back. Now, as you can see, that's not much waste. So the way I look at it is this I find to be very economical. So now I need number 7. So I'm going to take number 7, and remember I cut 2 of these. So I'm going to take the top one off. I've got number 8 there as well. So number 7, I'm going to take the top one, place it face down so when I go to do the next block, it's in position. I want right sides together. I'm going to place it on there. And again, turn it over. I should have turned it like that first. There. That's what it looks like from the stitching side. If I get it messed up a little bit, I can readjust it at the sewing machine, but I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew right along the edge of that paper, and I'll be back when I do that. So I've done my stitching along there. You can see what it looks like from that side. So fold it back over. Give it a little bit of the magic juice. Fold it back. Finger press. And that's a little too close. Press it right along the seam line. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh, did I cut that accurately? I'm going to do a check. What was I? I was working on 7. There's 7. So I'll press that just where 7 was. Now, how do I know that I have enough fabric here? I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, that doesn't look like enough. But if I turn it over, there's my number 6 piece. When I fold this back, I should have 1/4 of an inch. And for some reason, this one looks a little short. And I think I did cut those a little. I think I used 1/4 of an inch on the side, and I should have a little bit more. I'll check the other side as well, and I think I did cut those just a little. Oh, see? Now that is a mistake right there. I don't know what I did when I was cutting my fabrics. So that is why I only do 1 block to start with. If I cut all my pieces and I end up with a mistake like that, I've wasted all my fabric. So now I have to take both of those pieces out. That sucks, doesn't it? How do I take them out? You'd almost think I did that on purpose, just so I'd have to show you how to take the stitches out. No, that was an honest mistake. I'm going to fold those two pieces back. I just must have lined up my ruler not quite accurate enough. So I will have to recut those pieces. I've zoomed in, and now I'm going to take out those stitches. A 1.5 stitch length is quite small, but what I do is I start and just pick out if I can get one stitch out. And we'll just, okay, now what I'm going to do is that's loosened a little bit. Maybe not quite enough. I'll have to use my snips. I just want to release the end of that seam. And of course, it's not cooperating. So if you use the printer paper method, and you make a mistake and had to backstitch and used a small stitch length, this is going to be impossible to pick out. But the way I do it is I have released the end. Now I'm just going to use my little point there, and again pull it back, release it, and I can just go along, just pulling my fabric back, and I'm not cutting anything. If your fabric comes up, you can just press it down. You pull it back, release it, pull it back, release it. We'll call this section Shirley Messes Up. How about that? Find the right thread. There we go. So now what I have to do, let's trim those threads. Got it off. Now this one, it's just a little bit there. There we go. Put that in with my scraps. So now, because Shirley messed up, let's see if we can get this back now. There we go. So now we have to cut bigger pieces. So I'll go do that off camera, and I will be back and hopefully show you the rest of it. When I last left you, I was picking out my sections that I didn't cut big enough. I did come across something that probably is something you should note too, is if you look at gray for number 6 and gray for number 9, these may be the same size. If you're working on another pattern that has a 6 and a 9 and they're different pieces, what I did was I put a line underneath the 6 so I knew it was a 6. And I put a line underneath the 9 so I knew it was a 9. If you don't have anything on there to distinguish the 6 from the 9, you can get them mixed up. So that's how I distinguished between the 6 and the 9. So I've recut my pieces. I need to put them back in order now. So this is 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I can put those back in there. The other thing I want to show you is when I'm working on one block and these little pieces here, how do I keep track of them? Well, I've come up with sort of a dumb idea, I guess, but it seems to work for me. On my pattern that I had colored out originally and I had made my copies from, I have taken some removable poster tape, and this is the 3M Scotch, and it is 3/4 of an inch. It is removable, but what I did was I put strips all across this. Now I've cut them down to size a little bit and everything. Now remember, the freezer paper has a plastic coating on the back, so it will stick. What I'm going to do is take my pokey tool, and I've just laid it all the way across on here, putting some pieces along the edge and everything. So now when I finished with my patterned piece, and of course remember that's freezer paper, I'm going to just peel this up, and it's sticky now. So, and again, when the hands don't work, you use removable tape. You grab your piece and you put it back in place just like a puzzle, and I can just flip that back. So now the next one is 2 and 3. I don't have anything over the 2 and the 3, so I'm just going to cut off a piece and I'm going to put it over top of that 2. I just missed putting a piece on there. And the 3. This, remember, it's double-sided too. Okay, yeah, removable poster tape, removable, and it's double-sided. So now I'm just going to take that and put it over my pink piece. Use my pokey tool just to lift up that adhesive, and it's now sticky. So I'll take my tiny little number 2 pink, and I'm just going to place it right back over top of that pink. Okay, now I'm going to be using number 3. Remove that little liner. I still have my tape on there, so now I'll just take it and line it up. Hopefully my head won't get in the way. Once I've got it secured down off of there, I can just peel that removable tape off. The next one is number 5, so that's over here. So I'll just lift up this edge and put the pink right over top of there. The next one that we did was, oh, I did this out of order. That's okay. Let's put number 4 back in place. It's stuck down there, just take that tape off. And so I don't get anything all stuck all over the place, I'm just going to set that back on top. So that's what I did. Now, I can reuse those pieces. I will now carry on with my gray pieces where I left off. We did 5, So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next piece is number 6. So we'll carry on with our stitching. Again, we're going to do like I did before, and at some point I will stop and go ahead and finish this off camera, but I'll show you a few more sections and then hopefully you'll get the hang of it. So now I'm going to fold it back, and I've already cut this because remember I took that piece out. So this piece is already cut. I don't have to cut it again. So now, because I cut 2 pieces of the gray and it's wrong side up, I can take this one and just set it back in there for my next piece. I'll take this, turn it over, and hopefully I will have enough on here. I've placed it there, give it a turn over, and I've got lots on the edges there, right here and here. So now I'm just going to take that to the sewing machine and do what I did before, stitching all the way down before I had made my boo-boo. So I'll take that now and just stitch along the edge of the paper, and I'll be right back. Okay, I have, pardon me, I have stitched along there, and you can see that it's stitched. I'll fold it out again, and moisten that seam line. Give it a finger press. I'll use my pressing sheet here. Just press that seam down. Put this over top. Turn it over and press the number 6. And to do the double check, I'm going to just make sure, and oh yes, I have lots now. You can see that. Okay, so 6, the next one we're working on is 7. So I'll turn it so I have, where'd 7 go? 6, 7. So I'll fold it along that line. And remember, this is the other one that I had put on that the gray piece was cut too short, so that's already trimmed at 1/4 of an inch. So I can take my number 7, and if I turn it this way and place my pattern so it's face up the way everything should go, my number 7 should fit in that piece right there. It should go like this, and remember, I'm just going to take the bottom piece, right sides together, flip it over, and just stitch along the edge of the paper. I'll be right back. Okay, we've stitched that down now. I'm going to fold this up. Fold it to the wrong side. I see I've got a little bit of a bunch up a thread there. Now what do I want? I want my, oh, and my iron shut off. Sorry about that. Run my water brush along. I'm just going to double check my gray section here and make sure I've got, oh yes, I've got lots. Okay. take this to the iron now, and I do have enough fabric on my sheet now here, so I can just press this into place. I have to turn my iron down one notch. So we were working on 7, so I'm just going to press 7 down. Okay, so now we're working on number 8, which is up here. And there it is. Fold that back. Release my fabric. Use my add a quarter. Okay. Trim. And I'm working on number 8. Take my number 8. Make sure it's in the right place. Number 8. And I've picked up 2. So there's number 8. I'll take the bottom piece off. That goes in like that. Right sides together. And stitch along that line. Right along here. Okay, number 8 is in place. You will get in a rhythm of doing this, and it'll just go together absolutely perfect. And you can see my points right there are absolutely perfect. And now that I've said that, when I go to do the other one, it won't be. But it should. And that's the beauty of paper piecing, is because your points come out perfectly. Next piece we need to add on is number 9. I'll find number 9 on my piece here. Fold it back along number 9. Make sure that's folding back. And you can see I've stitched through the paper right there, but I'm just going to give that a little flip. And of course I have to trim now. So number 9 now. It's going to go exactly like that. Take my top piece off to be used again. Right sides together. And again, just take it to the sewing machine, stitch right along the edge of the folded edge of the paper. Stitched along that line there. Fold it back. I'll do one last round and then I'll stop the video, and off camera I will complete the other sections because it's just the repeat of this. And again, another perfect point right there. don't have to use my pressing sheet now because I've got enough fabric on that side. Which one did I do? 9. It's coming together now, and the next one now is 10. Number 10 is the purple. And I folded it along the pink, not the purple. So make sure you're lining it up on the right line, not do what I did. There's my excess. I'll trim that down to 1/4 of an inch. And take my number 10 piece, put it into position, and I'm going to take this off. Oh, sticky. There we go. And I'm going to lay this right sides together. And hopefully I didn't cut any of my other pieces wrong. It's just the gray, I'm hoping. I'm going to flip this over and just line it up. I'm going to set that off to the side here. I'm going to put my cutter on there. I have my little purple piece that I need to put back on here so I can reuse it. So I'll just flip up my tape. And put it on there. And just flip that back so I don't have any sticky on there. And now I can take this to the sewing machine and stitch that on. So I have number 10 stitched on. Fold it back. And you can see here where that doesn't look like it's lined up properly, but don't worry about it because you stitched right along the line and it should come out perfectly. And you can see that that point right there is perfect. And that has nothing to do with me. It's the paper piecing. So that piece now is stuck down. At any time during my stitching and everything, I can walk away and leave this and know exactly where I left off. So we're working on number 11, which is down here. Double check number 11 purple, and it should match exactly. So you know that that's the way it's supposed to go on, not like this. It should be in the proper position like that. Slide that off, fold it along the line. Get my little paper sheet here. Take that pattern piece off. Number 11 is down there. I have worked with smaller pieces than this, and it's worked out for me. The right side is facing down, so I'm going to line this up. Flip it over, and remember, stitch right along that line. Okay, I've stitched down number 11. And just look at how beautiful those points are coming out. And I really have no idea what this is going to look like when it's done. I just have that visual that I did with my pencil crayons and colored them in. So now I need number 12. So number 12 is going to go, which is the light purple. Number 12 is going to go over here. Just going to turn this around. And because I've pre-folded my paper, it's already pre-folded for me. Some people will fold it as they go. I prefer to do it before, and then I don't have to fiddle with anything. Trim that off to 1/4 of an inch. So number 12 should go like that. If I turn it so everything's facing me, I just look at the pattern, flip that back, and that's the way it's supposed to go. I can put my right sides together. Remove my pattern piece. And find out where number 12 is, and that is somewhere under here. There it is. There's number 12. Stick this back on. Now pick up my piece. Can line it up a bit before I take it to the sewing machine, and again when I'm at the sewing machine I'll give it a final line up to make sure that it hasn't shifted on me. Okay, number 12 is in place. How do I know that? Because number 13 is right in front of me, so I know that was 12. And finger press. Now you can see there where it's kind of floppy. right there. But when I turn it over and press it from the paper side, and I'm just pressing that little number 12 area there, you can see it's stuck down now. Okay, now 12, we're going to be working on 13. So there it is right there. Make sure I'm folding it exactly on that line. And now number 13 is going to go right there. Right like that. Placing it down, matching the cut edges the best I can. Pokey tool takes the paper off. And I think we're looking at this side now. So I'm going to put it back on there. Line it up and again take it to the sewing machine. Okay. I'm now going to put in fast forward, and I am going to complete the block in fast forward. So you'll see what I do, but it'll be sped up. If I mess up or anything, I'll stop and show you exactly what I did. Look at those beautiful points. Okay, on with it. Okay, fast forward. completed some of this off camera, but I'm on my last piece and it's number 41, which is the gray. And I'm just going to take this. I've trimmed away to 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm just going to take that one piece, and remember I did cut out 2 pieces, so I'm going to leave the label on that just so I know what it is. Okay, last piece. You can see how it's going on. If I can get this into frame. Now I'm just going to stitch that last piece on. Okay, there the last piece is stitched on. I'm going to put my water brush on there, take that final piece to the iron, press that seam, and now I'm just going to take and I am going to give it a final press throughout the whole thing just to make sure nothing has come up. The last step is just to trim our block out. So I'm going to line up my ruler on, you can see there's a dotted line there. That is the cutting line. The solid line is your stitching line when you put your pieces together. So I'll do all 4 sides here. We now have our block complete, and we'll flip it over. Now, here is the block that I wanted it to look like. And remember, this was my reverse copy. So there is my finished piece, and yep, dark yellow is here, dark green, and then my light green. So I put my darks here and my lights here. I like it. Now, I constructed that without any glue stick and without any pins and without any specialty rulers. My block measures 6.5 unfinished. All my points are perfect, and my pineapple block is completed. And with the freezer paper, unlike using copy paper, I can now release the paper from the back. I'm going to just do this carefully so I don't pull any stitches out. It's holding my seams. And I can just turn this. Now this is stuck really well because it's the first stitching. Now if I get it that far, now I can just peel it this way. If you peel it the way your seams are facing, it comes off really nicely. I have a few little loose threads here, but I can just give them a quick trim. The nice thing about the freezer paper is I now have this that I can reuse to make another block. I can also reuse my pieces if I haven't cut them out in the beginning to make more than one block. I can simply remove my freezer paper and cut out my pieces to make another block. I think that's everything that I needed to discuss. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments below, or you can email me directly at my email address in the show more section under the video.